One mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, where I watch shit so you don't have to. And today I'm here to talk about Season 2, Episode 10, the Season 2 finale of Hulu's Only Murders in the Building, entitled I Know Who Did It. Before I get started, I want to, first off, apologize for how late this video is getting out. I had a work dinner after work yesterday, Tuesday, and when this dinner was scheduled, I didn't realize it was going to be the same day as the season finale. So I was sitting here telling you guys like, oh, it should be smooth next week. I shouldn't be late with it or whatever. Failing to remember that I had this dinner. So by the time I got home from the dinner, it was too late to record the video. I had watched the episode, but it was just too late for me to record the video. So here I am recording it right now. I want to say that's the last time that's going to happen, but this was the season finale, so duh. The next order of business, real quick, is I want to give a shout out to my first two patrons, Delvin Cox and Brett Factual. For those of you who have probably consistently been watching these Only Murders videos, this is the first you're going to be hearing of this because I set up the Patreon in between these 2 weeks. But if you're curious about the Patreon and you want to support the channel, there is a video in the feed. I believe it's 2 videos back. I think the previous video is for House of the Dragon, and then the one before that, it's called Major Announcement in all caps, and it lays out the various tiers in the Patreon, how much they cost, what you get for them, etc. So if you're curious about the Patreon and you want to support the channel, check out that video. And there's also a link in the description here, as there will be on every subsequent video that links you to the Patreon as well. And in the tiers, I think starting at the $3 tier, I believe, you get shout out. So like how I shouted out Delvin and Brett at the top of this one, you join at $3 or higher and you'll get shouted out at the beginning of these videos as well, and in the description. If it gets to the point where it's out of hand and I'd be sitting here running off 30 names at the beginning, we'll change that to them just being in the description. But for now, I'll say them on the video. All right, so that's all the stuff I had to kind of like, I guess, set everything up. And now we can talk about the episode. So I want to start by talking about just kind of like the nature of this finale, because the season 1 finale, one of the things that, well, not the finale itself, but the season as a whole, I think when you are just sitting and casually watching a show, particularly one like this, like a comedy, something that's a little bit light, it doesn't require heavy analysis, you can kind of sit back and chill. And for me, that's what I did for season 1. It had already completely aired. I had no interest in the show because at the time, I despised Martin Short and didn't like Steve Martin. This show has made me love both of them. But, well, I've loved them on this show, we'll put it that way. But I had no interest in the show, but I was hearing it was good, so I said I'll check it out. And so I casually watched it way after the fact, and the big problem I had was I felt like the Jan reveal at the end of season 1, there was nothing there to support that. Like, I had no way of guessing that earlier in the show. Now, I want to be able to participate in figuring out who the killer is in these seasons. But I've noticed that, I think now with me being able to keep a closer eye on these episodes and really break them down and try to pick apart what the show might be telling me, I've now kind of come to the conclusion, and if I go back and watch season 1 with an analytical eye, maybe I would have come to this conclusion as well. But this now feels like they give you a little bit to figure out who the killer is, but for the most part, they're intentionally giving you red herrings, and they're intentionally giving you not necessarily wrong information, but information that you don't need that could lead you in the wrong direction. And now that I know that that's intentional, I'm a little bit more okay with not being able to figure it out at the end, because now it feels like a game. Like, it feels like you're fucking with me. Like, okay, you're telling me that, like, they had the one episode where you're supposed to walk away from it thinking that Nina is the killer. And, like, Nina doesn't even show up in this episode, for one. Nina, like, there's so many reasons it couldn't be Nina, but they wanted us to believe for one episode that it might be. And I think all of that is a means to, like, hey, we're going to give you some entertainment in the episode. You're going to get your laughs. You're going to get your clues. You're going to get your things to talk about. But at the end of the day, none of this shit is going to lead you to Poppy. And I kind of like that game, because now going into season 3, I'm going to be thinking, okay, I'm going to be looking at all the clues just like I did this season. I'm going to be drawing conclusions based on what I saw just like I did this season. But now I'm going to have to wonder, like, is this a real clue or are they just giving me something that doesn't matter to kind of just steer me in the wrong direction? So, like I said, like I do every week, I'm going to talk about the things that we learned essentially in this episode, which really kind of just boils down to who the killer is. But I'm also going to talk about some of the red herrings that they threw out this season, things that I talked about in videos as like serious clues that turned out to not mean shit. And there's probably ones that I don't even remember, but I'm just going to talk about the ones that like, I kind of just, pulled them off the top of my head, and I'll talk about those ones that I remembered. And if you remember some more things that were done to fake us out, throw it in the comments. What did we learn? Well, for one, we already knew that Poppy was Becky, but we kind of learned the nature of her life prior to deciding to become Poppy and hook up. Well, not hook up with Cinda, you know what I mean, but work with Cinda. We saw that she had a weird relationship with the mayor that felt very creepy, felt very rapey. So we could see why she would want to get away from that. And then we saw her home life was pretty bad too. We saw, I think what did she like Google like how to disappear or something like that? Like, so we saw that she had a pretty rough life. And that would kind of like, this is going to tie in with a later topic, but later I had in my notes, and I can just mention it now, that when they accused Cinda of doing this crime, everything they put forth was valid, but Cinda raised the point, like, why would I do that? Like, what is my motive? And that's always something that I think the show purposely minimizes so that we don't think about it. I talked about it on the show. I might have even said specifically why would Cinda do that. But they gave the idea that, like, okay, Cinda's trying to create content for her podcast. But there's other times where they put somebody out there, like Nina, for instance. What is that person's motive? Why would they do that? What do they have against Bunny? That was kind of like the theme of all my theories last week. I'm like, but why would that then result in killing Bunny? So that reminded me of something that I wanted to put as a red herring. So just bear with me. I try not to type during the video, but I really don't want to forget this, and I want to talk about this as well. So there we go. Got that done. All right, where was I? So yeah, I was talking about these fake outs and this information that we didn't need and people's motives. So they did a good job, I think, of painting a motive for Poppy, and while still keeping Cinda as a possibility, but they start to kind of build this for Poppy as a motive. And I'm not going to sit here and pat myself on the back like, oh, I figured out it was Poppy. I talked about Poppy last week, but like, I think I even said this last week. Anything I figure out after episode 9 don't count. like that's too late in the season to pat yourself on the back. But they decide they're going to throw this party, and they're going to reveal who the killer is at this party. And Cinda shows up, and they do this whole thing where they present their case for why Cinda is the killer. And Cinda, like I said, she kind of goes like, why would I do any of that? And then Mabel then goes, oh, wait, no, it's not Cinda, it's Alice. And she says that Alice, Alice was like, I think our episode 1 suspect. Says that essentially Alice was using Mabel's tragedy for her art, and that 14 for Savage meant that she wanted $14 million for that painting, the one with Charles' father in it. And I'm wondering, like, is she making this up? Because we have no evidence to support Alice wanting to use Mabel's art. Like that is a possibility. It makes sense. But what evidence does Mabel have to make that accusation? And like 14 for Savage, like, oh, that must mean $14 million. Like, all of that felt like guesswork that she presented as facts. So even then, I'm still kind of sitting there like, what is going on here? And then Alice stabs Charles. And like, let me tell you, like, I went for a brief lunch break, probably around 12 to 1 o'clock, some-ish in that range yesterday. And that's when I watched the episode. And I'm in this grocery store. It's called Plum Market. I don't know if they have it everywhere, but it's kind of like a Whole Foods in that they got like grocery stuff, but then they have like a hot food section where it's like kind of like buffet style. You can like scoop out your own portions and then you pay by weight. So I got some food there, and I'm like, I'll just sit in here and I'll eat my food and I'll watch the episode. And I'm watching the episode. Oh God, when she stabbed Charles, I gasped like in the middle of this restaurant because it looked real. I thought, and then they played it up for a little bit. So I'm like, what? I'm thinking in my head, like, there's no way they're going to kill off Steve Martin's character, but this looks like really authentic. So I love that scene because like I said, I literally gasped. So after the stabbing, it eventually, wait, what happens? Cinda gives Mabel props on figuring out that it was Alice, and this is the straw that breaks the Poppy's back, because then Poppy is kind of like, she basically goes on her whole spiel about how Cinda treats her and how undervalued she is and how much value she brings and doesn't get credit for, and then now she's immediately giving props to Mabel, and then somewhere in that conversation she lets slip about the passages behind the walls, and they're like, well, only the killer would know about that. And then that's when we kind of get the confirmed reveal that Poppy was the killer. We learned that the 14 Savage was actually 14 Sandwich. The number 14 in the diner was the liverwurst and marmalade sandwich that Poppy ordered, which, what the fuck? But that, I have a couple of cons about this episode and the season as a whole, and that was one of them, because it's like, we would have no way of knowing or even guessing that Mabel misheard what Bunny said. So us working with 14 Savage, I don't have this in my red herrings list, but this was a red herring. Because like, they say 14 Savage, we're going to think it has something to do with Charles. We got Charles' dad in this painting. We have all these reasons to think it's associated with Charles, and then it just turns out it's Sandwich and not Savage. And there's no way we could watch these episodes and go, maybe she actually said Sandwich. Like, there's no way we would get that. But that would have been a vital clue, because then maybe we think like, okay, they go eat at this deli. Maybe what sandwich is number 14? So like, they could have led us in that direction, but they purposely gave us something to divert us away from that, and it's something that we could have never figured out was a trick. So a little trickery on their part, but whatever, I'll allow it. But I love how after Poppy starts confessing, she slips now into this, I guess, I'm assuming, Oklahoma accent. I don't know if you guys caught that she had a totally different accent after it was revealed that she was a killer, but I thought that was cool. We found out that Krebs was actually into Poppy and not Cinda. We also see him getting arrested, and we see them essentially planning all of this out together. And then after that, we kind of move on to, once they get arrested, we kind of move on to like, what's kind of like the, here's how everyone's doing now, but then it's also combined with the setup for season 3. So we see everything's going well for Charles on the new Bravos. I watch a lot of Game of Thrones, people. On the new Brazos show. He's no longer in a wheelchair. He's got a speaking part, I believe. He's got more speaking. They took away his dementia. That's what it was. And he seems to be having a burgeoning love life. And then Oliver starts to confess, presumably to Will about, well, not presumably to Will, it's definitely Will. He starts to confess to Will, presumably about not being his father, and Will stops him, and it's basically, you know, the same thing that you kind of see in TV and movies all the time, like, you're my father, I don't want to hear anything else, you know, that kind of thing. And then he gets a call that we don't hear, but we gather, and what ends up to being the case is that he's going to direct a Broadway play. And then that leads us into the final scene. It's a year later, nothing has happened in this time, and Oliver's play, I'm assuming, is premiering. And Charles is in it, along with, his name was Ben something, but it was Paul Rudd. He's played by Paul Rudd. Clearly, these two have a problem with each other. Paul Rudd calls him, I don't know, fuckface, or something to that degree, some sort of insult. And then I wrote down something that Charles said that I thought was interesting. He said, I know what you did, and I want you to stay away from her. Something like that. He says that to Paul Rudd's character. And then the play starts, and we see Paul Rudd's character essentially fall out, blood pouring out of his mouth, presumably poison. So that's our setup for season 3. And this is going to be a small benefit to the fact that I recorded this video late. It was released earlier today that Paul Rudd has officially signed on to be in the season 3 cast. Now, is that going to be, you know, is he going to be a regular? Probably not, since his character is dead, but he'll probably be in flashbacks or something like that. Or it could just be a thing like, hey, this is how we're going to end it, and then we're going to resolve that in episode 1, and then we'll go from there. Like maybe he lives or something like that, and then we just kind of go from there, and it becomes a who tried to poison me story, and we get him in present day. But whatever the case may be, Paul Rudd has officially signed on to be on the season 3 cast, which is, I mean, I could not think of better luck for those of us who are fans of this show, particularly me as someone who looked at this show and it came out like, I don't like Martin Short, I don't like Steve Martin, I don't particularly care about Selena Gomez, and then now I'm watching this show, loving it, one of my favorite shows to watch, and then you're gonna add Paul Rudd? Like, are you shitting me? Like, that's great. So, really looking forward to season 3. But now I want to talk about a couple of the cons that I had real quick, and then I want to give some thoughts, and then I want to talk about some of the red herrings they threw out. So, when Poppy was at the diner with the Omit B crew, how come the waiter Ivan didn't go, hey, you're the person who Bunny was here with the day that she died or the day before she died? Because I wrote down in my notes, I guess it's not Poppy because the waiter didn't say anything. So the whole thing about who was she there with, to the point where they asked that same waiter to pull up the footage, and they, you know, he knew the importance of whoever it was Bunny had dinner with that day. You know, they pull up the footage, all that good stuff. She places the order for this sandwich, which would have presumably been the same sandwich that she ordered when she was there with Bunny. And for some reason, this guy says nothing. So, like, I feel like that feels like a little plot hole-ish. Like, I feel like he would have recognized her and said something, like, pulled up something like, hey, that's who Bunny was here with the day she died. And boom, story done. But that ends up being the same time where Mabel gets the call from Detective Williams about the prints on the knife. So they still end up arriving there anyway. And then how would Poppy know about the passages in the walls? You know, I think one of the red herrings was, I think, the idea, and this could have been something that, I can't remember if this is something that I made up or something that they posited on the show. I feel like they put it out there on the show, the idea that the killer would have some sort of awareness that passages in the walls exist, because I feel like there was something about like blueprints or architecture or who built the Arconia, something to that effect, that led me to believe that whoever it was that was the killer, since they knew about the passages, they must have some sort of intimate connection with the design and structure of the building, which is why when I put out that firefighter theory, I thought about that too. Like, okay, maybe a firefighter would know that there's passages inside the walls. So I don't see how Poppy, being from Oklahoma and not living there, and obviously clearly not being the person who built the building, how she would know that she could escape through passages via Mabel's apartment. So not anything that's like a game changer where I'm just like, oh, fuck this show. Like, not at all. I don't care, but it is something that I noticed. A couple of thoughts. I liked when I love when shows acknowledge that they're shows. Like, you can't do it all the time, and it might not necessarily be a breaking of the fourth wall. Fresh Prince did that a lot, where they would break the fourth wall. Well, not a lot, but they did it enough. I always thought it was great. But I love how Oliver, right before the opening theme, he says something like, this is not really feeling like a finale yet, because he's talking about how everybody's like seemingly off their game. So I like the fact that he called out that this was the finale. I always like when shows do that. Cinda being afraid of slow motion is so random and funny enough as it is. Like, who even writes that? Like, yeah, we should make her be afraid of slow motion. That was enough. But then Charles breaking out into the slow motion and everybody joining in, that shit was fucking hilarious. I thought the tomato thing was funny too, but it wasn't as funny as Charles just randomly just starting to move in slow motion and watching Tina Fey just kind of start to like clench up like, oh, this is off-putting. I thought that was great. And I just wonder what kind of mind writes something like, you know what would be funny if we made her scared of slow motion? Like, what? And then it doesn't even lead anywhere other than to a joke about them being in slow motion. So, I don't know. I thought that was great. And I also love the term killer reveal party. I love things that kind of like riff on the language. So the idea that killer could both be, it could be a party revealing the killer, or it could be, killer could be used as a word that's describing the party, like an adjective. So like, are we talking about the killer as in a person, a noun, or are we describing the party as killer, like an adjective? So I thought that was, I like plays on words and whatnot, so I thought that was good. And then lastly, a couple of the red herrings. So the one that I went to write down in the middle of the video because I didn't want to forget it, the whole thing about Charles and his father and who his father was having sex with, none of that had to do with Poppy or the killer. So, like, that was all, like, because, like, again, my mind was fixated on the idea that somehow this, because how many times did I go, like, maybe Poppy is the descendant of someone? Not Poppy. Well, I did say it with Poppy, but maybe Bunny was the descendant of someone. Maybe the killer is somebody who, you know, was the husband of, what did I say, the husband of Leonora, and all these things that had to do with like relationships and cheating and that being the cause for the motive. None of that mattered. And like that doesn't bother me because it feels intentional. Like if it felt like they were just doing shit and it didn't track, it didn't add up, that would bother me. But that very, very distinctly feels like purposeful manipulation, and I'm okay with that. Like if I feel like if they're doing that, like I said, it feels like we're jockeying back and forth here. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. You're trying to prevent me from doing that. And rather than just hide facts, you create fake facts to mislead me. I'm okay with that. Because now I'm going to enter into season 3 like, okay, so that's the game we're playing? All right, let's see if I can figure out which things matter and which things don't. And that's going to make season 3 even more fun to review on this channel. The matches didn't lead anywhere. I thought it was going to have something to do with fire or smoking or whatever. The fingerprints didn't even lead anywhere. So, well, kind of, but not really. So the matches didn't really matter. The sneezing did matter, but I still think this was a fake out too, because it sounded like a man sneeze in the passages, but Poppy doesn't have a man sounding sneeze. So like I feel like the sneezes don't match, but again, I'm fine with that. That too feels like something that's like a purposeful fake out / red herring, and it's not something that's like a plot hole or something like that. And then also, the show doesn't know which things I'm going to lean into. You know, they might say, okay, we're going to put out 10 things as potential evidence of who the killer is, but only 2 of those things are going to be actual clues, and 8 things are going to be fake outs. They don't know which of those things I'm going to latch on to and which ones I'm not. So this next one, for instance, like the rubber gloves, boots, suit that the killer had on when they came to kill Bunny, led nowhere. And I latched onto it. I'm thinking like rubber gloves, like this must be tied to this person's profession, like all this kind of stuff. Didn't lead anywhere at all. Everything with Nina led nowhere. Like I said, she didn't even appear in the episode. Everything with Alice was a red herring. Everything. Nothing about Alice mattered. Like, you take Alice and her storylines completely out of this show, you lose nothing as it pertains to solving the mystery. Now, you lose the connection that Alice and Mabel built. You lose whatever entertainment you might have gotten out of the Alice character. But like, as it pertains to the murder, Alice meant nothing. It had nothing to do with her art. It had nothing to do with manipulating Mabel's tragedy. None of that was real. So I dig that the fact that they had these red herrings, and it just makes me more up for the challenge next season. So hopefully we'll get a quick turnaround like we did between seasons 1 and 2, and I will see you guys in approximately a year or so to talk about season 3. Let me know what you thought in the comments. Join that Patreon, and until next year, peace.